Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and if you watched yesterday's video, we did get to show you guys a little bit of an aspect behind Artak and his ability to do a little bit of work, not only at Stage 7, but also Stage 11 for Sand Devils, which are some pretty interesting spots to throw down in for the sake of the resources you gain. Recently on my live stream, as well as some other places, I've been actually doing everything I can to see if we can bring him to stage 24. And lo and behold, we finally got something for you guys. So, just a quick heads up, I did do some changes from what you've seen in the Artak video that he did the solo Sand Devil stuff earlier. His build did change, and it did change into a way that made it a little more optimal for stage 24. And this will ultimately be the build that I probably will sit with for a good while. Before we go too much further into the build, I want to show you guys the rotation and basically what makes it work and how it works, and then we'll kind of go from there. And then pretty much it's kind of similar to the concept of what you've seen before with duo comps revolving around God Seeker and Aniri. Artak is one of those same ones that as long as you apply HP burn and you can also apply maybe some HP burn explosions, you'll also be able to get the boss down in a gradual state. Him being magic affinity also means that for stage 24, this is probably one of the more optimal areas, similar to those that like Chronim, for example, or Ninja, or any of the other champions that do well based on the fact that they have a little bit of an affinity difference there. But of course, the main staple is Aniri herself. Now, one of the concerns we had when it came to Artak's abilities and whether or not he would be viable is Burning Blood and how it affects not only some of his offensive stats and defensive stats, but also his speed. So when you're doing speed compositions, any deviations from speed can make or break, and more often times than not, they break. You want that consistency across the board. Well, we found something today, and I hope you guys are looking forward to it. And the main goal is that we try to keep the team alive as much as possible. Through most of the ways outside of the main hit, which is the hit that he does before he goes to sleep, and we'll show you guys the fight here in just a minute. What kills the team ultimately allows Aniri's passive and eventually her res to kick in afterwards. So the only thing that we actually have to set up is that Aniri's in the main role. She's in the primary slot, the lead role, even though she doesn't have an aura or anything like that to benefit her. And that's for the sake of Guardian Angel. Basically, if an ally's about to get killed by a fail hit, preempts that hit and instantly replaces a revive on death. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when it's fully booked, so that's kind of ideal. And then, of course, Artak, we just want to make sure that whenever he does have the opportunity to choose between any of his abilities, he's prioritizing Purify. And I don't know if you noticed, but my cooldowns are also not fully optimal either. I don't have all the books in the world to fully book them up. And I was also unlucky with the T1 or his A1 getting fully booked before the other two, but that's okay. For the sake of purposes, we wanted to make sure at least we get the chance debuff being placed, ultimately placed, and then from there we wanted to prioritize making sure Purifier is on the higher side of priorities. So let's get into the run. I'm going to kind of explain it to you how this works, and then you can kind of get an idea of things. Aniri and Artak are going to die whenever he does that big hit of the Feasting Swarm. And during this period, what happens is that Aniri, her passive kicks in, basically bringing whoever's in the lead role. It goes from lead role to priority slot 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, of course, 5. We put her in the lead role so that she basically self-reses. And then from there, she also kicks in with her heal to bring back Artak, which you just saw right now. And then Artak, because of Aniri's ability, and I'm going to go ahead and pause it right here, because of her res ability, she also resets the cooldowns of all the abilities that the target that got res gets, which means that all of Artak's abilities are available to him, which is why that cooldown doesn't really matter for the sake of this content. Now, when she resets, I think by default his ability priorities by default goes A2 then A3, believe it or not. So us setting in the priority listing of his in the AI allows it that whenever he gets res, he's always going to shoot that A3, which is what places the HP burn in the first place. Now, we haven't talked about stats and whatnot yet, but there is a big bit of stat beef requirements when it comes to doing this duo combo, and it's very difficult to achieve those, and I understand that frustration. And one of the things that was interesting is that, remember, we talked about the passive for Artak maybe fluctuating in there. We got him set in a speed range that allows him to stay within range because of the fact that he loses his destroyed max HP, comes up not only from him getting activations on HP burn, but the boss itself. The mechanic of the boss also includes that as a variable. And then with Aniri, one of my experiences was that he got as low as like 50% at one point when I was doing a lot of testing and as I was climbing. And once he got under that 50%, like where like his available max HP at the time was less than 40, his survivability did go down, and that could ultimately like mess with the run because, you know, Aniri's passive would kick in, it would res him, and then they both die and the run's over because Aniri can't get back up. We saw that like with that issue. I had to lead actually more into Aniri. And bring her up to a point where her ability to keep and sustain both of them was a lot more important, and that actually did play a part into how her kit was developed, as well as how Artak is performing too as well. Failures to place the HP burn to recover some health, and then also I'm going to show you something that I did that there was a way to get around, but my experiences as I was climbing was also like I found out a reason why I was losing more HP as well. And we'll show you guys that when we get around to like you know what we have equipped on them and all that stuff like that. But the main concept is, you know, the swarm goes, it hits, Aniri's passive kicks in, then she reses, and then of course Artak puts the HP burns, activates it, and then you just sustain through the next couple of hits while you wait for the rotation to start back over again. I'm going to disappear while you guys watch the rest of this fight. I believe it shouldn't be, depending on how successful Artak is with landing his abilities, it shouldn't be no more than roughly like maybe 4 to 5 minutes, and we'll discuss maybe some ways to optimize it in the future from there. But I'm going to go and disappear. Hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you soon. Alrighty, I'm not gonna lie, he did miss a couple of HP burns, and that ultimately led to like the run going a little bit more longer than usual. But I did want to show you guys this. The runs in terms of my best on out of all my experiences so far have been roughly around like 4 minutes, and I'm gonna explain to you. I think this can get chopped down to another couple seconds at a minimum. In terms of some stats I can inflate on Artak, I kind of did some very minimalistic efforts towards getting him towards this point. And that's only because of some of the sets we're using. My ability to get some good pieces has been kind of like rough recently. I've been trying to struggle, you know, for lack of better words, getting regeneration gear and getting it at sufficient stats to allow my champions to do what they gotta do. So as that gets replenished and revitalized and improved, you'll see like that get a little bit easier. But allow me to explain. Before we go into the builds, I want to kind of give you guys an idea of what Sand Devil stat requirements are at stage 24. One tool that I have to give a special nod to that I use quite a lot, especially when people ask me of like what would be some recommended stats for X champion whenever I'm doing Y content or whatever, and I pull this up quite a bit, and it's from Hell80s. He has a stage tool section where you can basically input the encounter you're trying to go in, and then it'll pull up stats based off of what you're fighting, whether that's the waves or the boss itself. So since Sand Devil stage 24 is just Sand Devil by himself, we only have to look at his stats, which is interesting. So 265 speed, his resistance is 480, which means that if you want to land anything on him, you have to have a minimum of 505. And then, of course, if you want to avoid any of the debuffs he's got going on, 675 resistance is what you need to have. It's a pretty steep number. With the way our team works, and then you could take all the variables about like how his damage goes and his defenses and anything else you want to take in mind with that. He has a 15% chance of critting someone right now just at base value, so when going against negative affinity, the likelihood of him critting is pretty much 0, and that helps out quite a bit, right, when you're formulating your strategies. For Artak, he's the least actual difficult of the two, like the difficult champion out of the two. He's the least problematic when it comes to building up the requirements for what you need to have him in. Now, in my experiences, I have tinkered with like weaker gear, and I've had to make some alterations. Like for example, I was using a much lower banner. As a matter of fact, I think I swapped the banner that was on my Seer in place of Artak just so I can get those extra stats. But 96 to 78 accuracy, it helps. Every little bit helps, and that's one thing that you're going to realize about these two builds is that they do have a pretty big demand, and trying to facilitate and get into those stats are going to be a challenge, but they're not insurmountable is the thing I'm going to say. So for Artak, I got him roughly around like over 70. I think my goal was around like 70,000 HP, no less than 69,000 HP. And then at the very least 2.5 was my minimum for defense that I aimed for initially. And as I started going along down the road, I was like, you know what? I'm starting to see like either he got killed a little too early or some stats. I made some adjustments as we went along. This was a process that took me a little bit. Now, I told you guys about like some areas that improvements that I could do to maybe potentially speed up the runs. I don't know if you noticed, but there's some key points that I want to list out that had some effects towards our performance. Towards the very end, there was one rotation's worth where the Artak tried to land his HP burning and missed, so that adds another 10 to 15 seconds minimum to the fight. And if you watch throughout the fight, if there's any other misses that happen, that adds more time onto it. But the main concept was just making sure I could sustain through it, and now from here, I'm going to basically work my way towards getting efficiency included now. So one of the things I work on whenever I do my account takeovers, or at a minimum for my own account, is let's establish the concept of what makes the thing work or succeed. Let's establish that first. That's the foundation that you build upon. Then you layer on better gear and better masteries and better optimizations. Or masteries are something I normally build as a part of like the foundation of it, because that normally doesn't change. But like gear is an ever revolving door. So like as I get better gear, I'll filter out the worst gear, maybe put that on somebody else that I'm working on for now, or discard it, whatever the case may be. But I'm building upon that, right? So the main concept was just getting into a place where he would live. Now I am going to go to another tool that Hell Hades has for people, which is the optimizer, and I want you guys to pay attention to this particular number right here, EHP, which is your effective health points, which is basically like your total survivability, basically, is what I like to enumerate that as, right? Or to announce this, what this stat means is basically a combination of what your defense plus your HP is versus the opponent that may have ignored defense or some kind of way to get true damage towards you, right? So like taking those modifications or those modifiers in mind, what is your total like level of survivability? And when I was building up, I was lower than 60-something thousand. I tried to do as low as 60,000 with maybe 3k HP or 3k defense, excuse me, and then I had to do some adjustments to a point where it's like, well, playing in mind that I needed to have a set like Immortal and Regeneration to kind of help sustain him through the hits that he needs to survive. I noticed that, okay, well, maybe having more HP, and that's what I ultimately ended up doing. Having more HP means that whenever my regen does kick in, I'm getting more substantially out of it, which means that I have a much healthier health pool whenever these hits come in. But then there got to a point where I was experiencing this with Aniri, where I had a lot of HP, but I didn't really have as much defensive stats, and I noticed that it didn't matter how much I healed up. The punches I was taking were significant to a point where she died. And eventually I got to a point where anything over like 255,000 EHP for Artak was more than ample enough. And I don't know if you noticed that during the stage 24 fight, he really wasn't struggling. If anything, if anyone that got maybe potentially closer, it would be Aniri. And that's where I'm going to lean at to the next side of this thing is that for the sake of purposes of this build, the most important stat you're looking for is hitting a decent amount of speed. I went as low as 224, 222. You can go higher. Try to stay within a certain amount of range for your Aniri, basically. But also keep in mind that he does go up a little bit as the fight progresses because he gets a little bit of destroyed HP, which the more percentage, like it goes in sets of percentages, and I believe the exact number is like, what, 5? No, for every 1%, excuse me. So every percent he loses, he also gains a stack of a speed as well as other stats, which in this particular case, his speed is my key point, right? So making sure that he is taking into mind, I don't want him to go too fast, I don't want him to go too slow. I found that like going around like the 220-ish range was like something that was very ideal for me. Then after that, it's pretty much just a matter of making sure you can land your debuffs. This is where I slacked off a little bit, I won't deny. A little bit of improvements here and there will probably go a long ways for this. However, the closer you can get to 505, which is the minimum requirements for him, the more optimal it'll be, the more consistent you'll have it. But I'm as low as 442. I think I went as low as 430 before I started improving ever so slightly with, getting extra accuracy wherever I could get it. And even then, there's still room for improvements. My glyphs are atrocious. So just, you're progressing like I am, you'll understand the experience. It's a part of the journey, right? In particular, another thing too is like in terms of making Artak work, at least having the A3 fully booked, or ideally at least up to level 4, is the play. My experiences from before he was booked to where he was booked, if you saw my other previous ones, is that like it slows down the run a little bit. The more he lands this, the more faster it picks up. So keep that in mind when it comes to your accuracy as well as your ability to land stuff. The A2 and the A1, believe it or not, are less relevant. And I'll tell you a little story that I had with my experiences with Artak. I actually did a retune on him. If you see my previous ones, like I said, from the level, from stage 7, the video I did there, I was using a much different set of rotation. I was even going down War Master and whatnot. But as the fight started progressing, he was either dying too fast, where I needed to facilitate maybe a little bit more mitigation. And then on top of that too, accuracy requirements started going up to a point where now I'm still struggling to hit those numbers, right? So the change was basically I need to lean more into making sure I can hit the stats I need to hit while also providing the mitigation. Survival is the name of the game. Once you survive, then from there we can compile a little bit more damage, and maybe as my gear becomes a little more optimal, we can slide maybe back over towards an offensive build. But for the sake of purposes of making sure I could live and do what I needed to do, I ended up changing my blessings to go down the road. Now, pause before you start building and copy and pasting this build. One thing I have to give you guys a note is, as I was progressing, around like stages 16 is where I hit my roadblock, and I struggled to like progress with my previous team. So like I used whatever I wanted to at the time as my good stuff, and then it got to a point where I was playing a res game comp, which is basically predicated around enemy max HP champions. They would get res right after he does his big swarm ability. We basically restabilize. They do their maximum enemy HP with maybe Lydia doing decreased defense a weekend, and then rinse repeat, and we would just do that while we were slowly chunking them down, and we made progress, and we ended up getting to like I would say roughly around like stage 18, 19, it got stopped again. It's like where my build that I have for like someone like my Duchess, which was my res at the time, she was not holding up anymore. Yeah, and that was with mitigation from Python, mitigation from Duchess on her own. The PvP build that I had was just not enough, and that's also got room for improvement, so I'm not going to go there. But I was like, okay, well, maybe now it's time to introduce Aniri to the rotation. I've been sitting on her for a little bit. I was like, all right, let's start adding her to it. And then I still faced some challenges along the way, and that ultimately allowed me to shift. But during the course of that, because of ability or the mastery, Master Hexer here, whenever Artak was placing his HB burn, he would activate it, and then the boss would activate it, and then activate it again, and then what you would experience is a multiple activation. So it went as far as 3 when it came to the extended duration, right? And every activation chumps away a little bit of the max HP. It destroys his HP as a part of his passive. So what ended up happening was he was losing too much of his maximum HP with destroyed HP, and then the boss was adding more on top of it, and it got to a point where he was having less than 50%, and I talked about this earlier, but that less than 50%, he didn't have as much maximum HP, which means that when he took that next hit after the swarm, which is the one you need to survive, he would just get one shot. And it was like, well, okay, what do I do around that? And here's my success to this, without having to either rebuild with resetting for my gems, which I don't have the most. I decided, okay, why not turn off the A2 then? So that whenever the boss gets his turn, he eventually cleanses himself, and he would only get 1 or 2 activations, which is on par with as if I didn't have Master Hexer, right? And that ultimately was my way around it, and I used pretty much these builds along the way, as I was progressing through the upper stages of Sand Devil, and they worked very, very well. With some caveats behind it, right? And I'm going to give you guys an example of some things that I experienced along the way. But before we go any further, let's get into Aniri. Aniri, on the other hand, when it comes to the build requirements, was a lot more demanding. I mean, like, it was a night and day experience, and I want to show you guys this so that you get an idea. But I did a lot of research, and I listened to a lot of opinions, such as Saphira, who a very intelligent person. And sure enough, I went through the process myself, and lo and behold, I went through the exact same experiences. So I'm gonna turn this off just so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm at. I went as far as 298 EHP, 299 EHP, 300, 305, and I struggled along the way. It was like as I got over 300% EHP, it was like, okay, it's about there. It's roughly there, right? Like maybe she would die to a unfortunate crit or something around the lines, and that would ultimately cause like a partial failure in the run altogether. Like the run would just fall apart. So like in terms of my statistical success rate, it dropped it, right? But then as I got over 305, 306, 307, and where I'm at right now is 307. Now, mind you, once I fully ascend all these artifacts, I'll be up to roughly 308. But at 307, where her current build as it is right now, I was able to successfully get this run to work to a point where I don't have to worry about, chance of failure anymore. And it goes without saying, anything less than that, what I would say about like 305,000 EHP, excuse me, for Aniri will fail at 24. I've gone as far as doing multiple tests. I've lost a lot of energy and silver for the matter doing this, and it took a lot of like play testing and a lot of like changing out pieces. There was like 3 or 4 pieces and accessories that I was constantly rotating out to see if I could find what would work for me. And eventually we hit this, and a lot of it's going to come from the fact that not only did I get good substat rolls or ascension rolls, awakening rolls, oil rolls, whatever you want to call it, but I also made some changes in some other areas that I'm going to point out here in a little bit. But where I got to right now was roughly around like 64,000 HP, and as close as I can get to at least for 4K defense. I tried going as far as like 3.5, 3.6 with like higher HP. It failed. So I think a minimum expectation of what you would want to expect is roughly around like 4K defense. 64,000 I think is pretty much on the lower side of things. I don't think you want to go too much lower than that 62,000, and then you're pushing at that point, right? But the higher you can go in terms of those two stats, the more her survivability goes up, right? And you want to keep yourself north of 300,000 EHP. So whenever you're doing your hypothetical builds in the optimizer or you're building up yourself, keep those numbers in mind. Now, I did not go 260, and it works just fine. The boss is 265 in terms of speed. I did go as low as 255, and the run failed. So we had to play in mind with those metrics, and to be honest with you, I tried to stay as close as I could to at least 260. So when I did my most recent test runs, I was like, okay, this works, right? But if I were to jump, a couple of speed gloves up or whatever, I would definitely get over that hump. But allow me to show you some key things that did play a big factor into my success. So number one, I got a lot of like triple rolls in terms of speed in 2 particular places, like for the shield and the weapon for the regeneration, and of course, as always, mandatory immortal regeneration, particularly for Aniri. I think for Artak, a minimum of regen is fine, but you got to make sure you got the stats to placate the damage intake you get. And I went immortal just to play just a little bit safer. But truth be told, I think a stray away from immortal won't be a make it or break it for her. Whereas Aniri, immortal and regen are important. She needs to live. She is the backbone of the team, surviving and being able to get you over the finish line, right? Now, in terms of like stats that I look for, basically it's literally you hit the speed minimums you're looking for, which was my first challenge. 260 speed was the desired outcome. I am 1 point short, but like I said, glyphing aside and all that stuff like that, it's achievable for me, right? But on top of that, defense, and then of course HP. Now, on the top side, I was lucky enough for at least 2 of the pieces to get HP rolls, which was what you could expect from a best case scenario, either defense or HP. For the shield, I got attack, so I was a little unlucky there. I didn't push it any further. But if I wanted to increase the stability of the survivability to a point where it's without a question of a doubt, the next step would be to take my pieces that I currently have equipped on her and then oil them up more. Now, the next big ones would be the bottom row, where it's even a little bit more important. At a minimum, you want flat defense HP, because those are the stats you're looking for. Ideally, you're looking for HP percent or defense percent, right? Those are the next step. Like this is like what you're looking for like an optimal situation within your immortal and regeneration. Then, of course, getting some speed rolls. I did get an unlucky attack roll here when I would have preferred in the speed or the HP percent side of things to give myself a little bit more room for improvement. And then, of course, this is probably the thing that saved my build, my chances of being able to obtain the desired outcome, which was getting HP percent on the chest, as well as it being a defensive percent chest. I did get unlucky with the HP rolls. I was trying to get speed there, but I did eventually, when I plus 16 this all together, I got an HP percent. I was like, okay, I can work with this. And then we went down the road of like progressing this. But room for improvement. What would I do? I would want to get like substat rolls that have the ideal stats I'm looking for instead of it being flat based. Get maybe the percentage based versions of those. For sure, and then of course optimizing my glyphs a little bit higher to give me that extra room. So the overhead is definitely there. I don't know if you're paying attention. The other thing that made this possible, and this is the other key piece that I technically have that would also, without even having to go down the road of glyphing, would give me the answer I'm looking for. I rolled up multiple pieces of regen pieces that particularly had speed, and I oiled it, and the second one I got was the one that gave me speed. I was like, okay, we got a speed with a speed piece. That was the next step, right? And this is kind of why where I think like your evolution is going to define how your focus of like gear priorities change. Artak built for soloing 7 means that I was able to farm food with at least the lesser oils, you know, these lower ones that I have 216 of, right? Getting to stage 11 opened the door for me to be able to slowly, maybe not as ideal in other areas like stage 24, for example, but it slowly allowed me to acquire the greater oils, which means that eventually once I got a good piece, I could go up an extra notch, and that would ultimately give me what I'm looking for, right? Going up to the next step, which was as I started progressing down the further, you know, as I made progression with my gear, I was able to go to the further stages and the higher stages, landing me roughly around 19. So 19 is also a Spirit Affinity fight, right? And I was like, well, 20, 21, 22, 23, I have a margin of error where, like, there's chances where Artak would get crit, which would proc Aniri's passive, or Aniri would res at the wrong time, which means that Artak was out of sync, which means that the HP burns weren't being placed when the boss was asleep, which means that the progress was just not going anywhere, right? So I had to make some changes, and I will note that Artak didn't get me through every single stage. It was Artak, and then I swapped out Mordecai as another example. And I had a manual like stage 21. Stage 21, as hard as I tried with Artak, he got this close, and weak hit. And eventually it got to a point where the boss would just wipe my team because I wasn't making any progress anywhere, and Artak was not stabilizing, and crit one time was all it took, and then the run fell apart. And it happened at the very end. I almost had it, but it wasn't enough. You could possibly do it, but it takes temperament. It's going to take wasted resources. I was like, you know what? Let's throw in Artak. Let's take out Artak. Let's take in Mordecai so that we can at least get the HP burns and going. And we eventually made our progress where we needed to. And I was like, okay, I got what I needed. Let's go to the next stage. And then we brought back Artak, and it was freeload from there, right? Actually, I think I left Mordecai for stage 22 since he was positive affinity. And then after that, stage 23, 24, we brought back Artak, and, you know, we arrived, right? But I won't deny it. Like, the stat requirements were pretty demanding. Oiling along the way definitely helped me out. And then, of course, I wanted to show you guys something important here that is a successful failure, is what I'm going to call it. I did, prior to any knowledge about Sand Devil, which I initially, like, the moment I had Aniri, I was like, all right, I'm going to prep her for Sand Devil. But not enough research, not enough groundwork, and, of course, my own experiences taught me that, like, completely booking her, unfortunately, may not have been the most desirable outcome, particularly for, like, the A3. And the reason why is that if I included food in tandem with some of the masteries she has, it would cause the composition to desync to a point where Artak would still be alive before the big swarm hit, and then I would use my Aniri would use her rest because it's off cooldown on one of the available food pieces, which means that when the swarm hits, she would revive, but then she doesn't have the rest for it. So that slowed down the run, and it made it inopportune. So, like, the cooldown was just a little too good, you know? And that ultimately determined that I was like, okay, for me, at this point in time with my Aniri, I may not be at the place where I can successfully farm her with food, and that was the reality. Now, how am I going to combat that? The only way I could see it right now would be maybe doing a shift in the build, which may require me to do a little bit of flexing around the speeds, maybe trying some alternatives like that, or I could just get another Aniri and try to book it up properly. But my main focus was making sure that I can get to a point where I can bring my gear to the next stage, which was the oils first. That was my priority. And now that I'm here, unless I get another opportunity for another Aniri to do what she has to do, I'm pretty much just going to go with the intent that when I'm farming oils, I'm just going to farm for oils, you know? But if you do so happen to maybe alleviate the reses and land them where you need to, the A2 is fine. The passive is ideal. You want to keep it at that level. But the A3, if you can possibly, like, alleviate yourself from doing it, I mean, it's all RNG at the end of the day. avoid getting it fully max booked out, then that would help you be able to sufficiently, because of the way the rotation works, be able to put the food in there with it, right? But with that being said, the masteries that I did pick are primarily like ranging around mitigation, right? We're trying to survive with like blast proof, increase our optimal healing, as well as the ability that after the swarm, once he wakes up, he heals himself, so you benefit from that heal too as well with Shadow Heal. Then of course Healing Savior, all the way down to where Elixir Life is at for the extra HP. So that's literally all that is. All this was just to establish getting myself as much value out as my heal, and then giving me extra HP to work with, which supplemented her EHP, you know, trying to get that number up to a satisfactory level range, right? And with these stats in mind, I was able to successfully get through Sand Devil 24. So I hope this all helped you out. One other thing I will say is that the build gets tremendously easier if you have, I think the most ideal would probably be like Miracle Heal. This works for both Hydra, Sand Devil type areas where destroy maximum HP is a factor in play. But if you look at like level 2, level 3, for example, and even at level 6, the amount of HP she gains is tremendous. I mean, 1,500 plus another 1,500, which is basically like 3K here for epics, and then another 1,000 at stage 4. So if you have a higher level, awakening on her, a level blessing on her, then the requirements for you to have to facilitate those extra HP stats are a lot smaller. It could get to a point where, you know, having HP percent as a bonus roll will allow you to change up maybe not going an HP percent route. So, like, you know, it's going to be an adjustment of min-maxing your stats and whatnot, but that blessing did you know, include a little bit more. So if I had that level 2, it would make my build just all the more effective. Now, I did go out of my way for something that I've been working towards, which was my Great Hall. As you guys know, it's still in the developing phase. I normally would be going for the 3x10 for the missions, which is where I'm currently at, for the 7 out of 10, but for the sake of content, my sacrifice is your pleasure. I ended up taking my level 1 HP and defense for Void, and I brought them up to stage 4, which netted me roughly about 4% in each area, right? So 2 to 6 is 4% gain. I did both of those two, and that was the last little bit I needed to give me the extra stats to further supplement getting Aniri to that 300 and plus, you know, 1,000 EHP. And I will encourage you guys to take that in mind if you're ever looking to do this content. Maybe stay true to your mission so that you can get these done and you can keep progressing as you do other stuff in this area. But if your focus is Sand Devils, and maybe you haven't looked in this area for like bonuses and you have extra medals laying around, it may be wise for you to lean down that route so that you can get maybe a couple more extra stats that makes your build overall a lot more relevant. And this just goes to show you the value of Great Hall. Great Hall, once you start getting some value out of it, you can see the payoff. Like once you start investing into you, the payoff is maybe not direct, but jumping from like level 1 to level 4 for both of them, immediately I saw a change, and it got to a point where like, okay, let me go with this little piece right here. Let me awaken and oil this piece right here. Boom, I have the build. And I want to encourage you guys just to like kind of observe each area that I implemented to get to that stage, and I hope that helps you guys out. Anyways, I'm on a tangent. I want to let you guys go. I'll see you guys in the next video, and if you haven't already considered to joining me in this journey that I'm doing for my account progression, feel free to subscribe. Don't forget to like, comments about what some of your experiences have been in Sand Devil. If you guys have any questions about my experiences, please feel free to ask me in there, and I would love to help you guys on your journey as well. So this is an open dialogue for you guys. Would you guys like to see some alternative duo compositions? I have at least one more in the barrel that I would like to maybe introduce to players that haven't seen it yet as an option. If you guys would like to see that, please feel free to. You know, I know Aniri's not acquirable, and maybe down the road, depending on when you watch this, maybe Artak is no longer available as a daily login champion. So you know, you're at the behest of your RNG from a sacred shard or an ancient shard to get your luck, and I understand that. So if you guys would like a much more attainable route, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I would love to dabble down that road if there's enough interest in it. And with that being said, I hope you guys all have a great and fantastic day. And always remember, stay ascended. Click together,